I want you to get together.
Like that because it does in this really interesting way address a lot of the conversations and perspectives we've had just on this podcast, especially the Yuga cycle.
Hmm.
And that at the heart of it, I've always had the opinion of, well, it can't just be Christian, like there's so many people on the earth. God must have, woven this truth throughout every religion, right?
Hmm.
I've always just clung on to that. And people might dispute that. People might say, "Well, yeah, you're kind of lost then because it's just what the Bible says. That's where the truth is." And if people feel that way, that's fine. But I sort of in this, I see some of this sort of reflecting on what we talked about with Bibu in the Yuga cycle and how things get reset. The heavenly order comes down, the divine order comes down, and this satanic element, this massive deception, this great deceptive force cajoles and coerces all of these, ne'er-do-well people who think they're fighting for their livelihood when they're actually signing their soul away to him. And that's I mean, such a huge metaphor that's come up in many different conversations in many different ways. And the other thing that you said that kind of sparked a thought in me is the again, not to go too far into the whole model of the earth and whatnot, but let's say there is this mountain, this magnetic mountain in the North Pole. Wouldn't they want to set up their military base as far away from that magnetic influence as possible? Because our
Hmm.
whole universe is electromagnetic. They would want to be where it's radiating at its weakest, not at its strongest. So they've created this, NATO alliance, and then they've created this Antarctic alliance and said, oh, well, nobody's allowed in Antarctica except for these scientific researchers. Meanwhile, who went down there first with their military, U submarines and all these crazy, kits to build out bases and whatnot. I mean, we've gone over this Antarctica stuff plenty of times on the show, so we don't need to retread all of that. But definitely fits into this potentially potentially earthly scoped theory. Really, I mean, it's huge. So
Yeah.
when it comes to the timeline, that is an aspect of this whole Tartaria theory that I think a lot of people, they see it, they're allured by it, but then it becomes, at least speaking from my own perspective, it became a little confusing. The numbers kind of became confusing. And I've heard you say that there's an element of Tartaria that is detrimentally Russian centric in the sense that there are people in Russia because KGB, they might as well be the CIA, right? They're not the heroes in this situation. They're just as bad as the CIA.
Hmm.
They see the writing on the wall and they're getting ahead of these theories in the same way that the alien deception has been sort of set so that when we see these demons, we think they're aliens, or when we see Christ and his saints, we think they're some kind of enemy.
Hmm.
Um, in that same way, Tartaria has been given to us in this very Russian centric way. When I've heard you say that no, this actually fits better into the Christian perspective, and you think about it, what was Jesus but a carpenter? He was a builder,
Hmm.
and he sort of comes from a lineage of temples, these great temples in the Middle East that some of them have been destroyed in these wars, but some of them are still standing, and many of these holy sites still play a huge role on the world stage, especially now considering everything going on in the world. Former President Trump was just shot in the ear yesterday, and yeah, there's a lot going on. So when it comes to the timeline, though, where do we start to sort of understand how the timeline was manipulated, and maybe that can help us see where Satan began this reign or this little season?
Yeah. So there's a lot of theories on this.
Like, I can just give you all the ideas that are out there. I don't know what the answer is. It's very complicated. This is the problem. It's so convoluted and complicated. I described it as what's it called? Is it the Gordian knot? Is that the this
Yeah.
famous knot that people can come and try and untie, and no one's been able to do it. I imagine it as something like this big ball of tied up yarn that's been knotted together, and it's kind of or Christmas lights, let's say, it's been done beyond repair, and it's so bad that you've got no chance like of getting a perfect timeline now. It's been destroyed. It's been just utterly, thoroughly mangled beyond repair. Like, you're never going to get a clear picture now. We can try our best. We can get close, but you're not going to get a timeline, narrative, a chronology. Bam, done, perfect. And I don't care who claims they have, they're lying to you. No way has anyone got the perfect chronology. They're a con man if they're telling you they have, to be honest. We're way beyond this. It's kind of, we can do the best we can. So let's start with Christ, year zero, as we've been told by our Gregorian calendar, okay? So Christ is born, he has 33 years, and then he's crucified, okay? And then we're told there's a time of Pentecost, and then his ascension, and then he comes back at some point. That we're told he's coming back for his people, okay, after his ascension. Most futurists today, Christian futurists, believe we're still waiting for him to return after that ascension. It's been 2,000 years, and he's still not here, okay? This theory blows all of it out of the water. All of this modern, predominant churchianity worldview that the coming of Christ is just around the corner ends with this theory. It all happened already. Likely with the destruction of that temple, which was prophesied to happen. Jesus said, you see the stones of this temple? Not one stone will be left on top of the other. By the end of all of this, when I return, it's all going to get destroyed. And that happened in 70 AD. And we have Josephus Flavius, a first century Jewish Roman historian, like kind of this weird mix, a scholar of the time, a historian. He documented the destruction of the temple and witnessing chariots of fire in heaven raining fire down from heaven, and purely like Jesus Christ himself had returned with his angels to destroy that place, and that's one historical record we can go off of eyewitness account of seeing something heavenly come down and do something. So people have argued, okay, so 70 AD, that's when Christ really returned, and that's when prophecy was fulfilled. So up until that, we had the persecution of the Christians, the beast system rise, and the mark of the beast was done. People have speculated perhaps that was Nero, because he was burning Christians like candle wicks, you know what I mean? He was doing some pretty horrible things to Christians. It's speculated, when John, who was locked up in Patmos at the time, writing Revelation after Christ came to him, it said he had to speak in code because he couldn't be seen to be utterly talking against the Caesar, because he was so he referred to him as the beast, whose name is 666, and people have argued that Nero can be geometrically broken down into 666. But there's issues with all of this, because again, we can't necessarily trust the record of when these Caesars supposedly even were anymore, if all of it's been made up and jigged around and lied about. But people would say Nero was likely the beast then, and his money, which he forced on the Israel at the time, they had to use his money with his face on it to buy or sell. No other currency was allowed, type of thing. People would say that was them forcing the mark on the people of Israel. That was the mark of the beast. We don't know, though. We can just speculate and have ideas. Most traditional preterists and amillennialists would say yes, that was the case. That it must have been Nero 70 AD, and that's when the millennial reign began. But then people, they kind of have this assumption, but it was a spiritual reign. It began then and it goes on forever now, and Christ, the kingdom is always come. If you have that. But what we're saying is, no, it was a physical, real, tangible, ruling with an iron rod on a throne kingdom that was set up. Not some spiritual thing in heaven that trickles down onto earth through spiritual means. That's what most traditional preterists go by. Now, people have called what we're talking about preterism. This is not preterism, so-called. This is not the formalized Jesuit thing that was created in the 1600s to describe it, preterism. This is something else, okay? This is the words of Christ telling us himself. In Revelation, first of all, repeatedly, I come quickly. Seal not the words in this scroll, John. Tell everybody, because the time is at hand. Now not 2,000 years in the future, now. These are the words of Christ himself. Those who pierced me will see me come back with my kingdom, is what he says. That's pretty immediate. Those who stabbed him with a spear on the cross are going to see him come back. You know, he told Caiaphas, the Pharisee, you will see me come back in my kingdom. You right here, this man, like, you are going to see me return in the clouds, riding with my kingdom and angels. You will see me come back. You know, before he was even crucified, he said that. You know, in the Olivet Discourse, when he's talking to his disciples, he's saying, this generation will not pass away before they see the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds in all his glory with his kingdom. You will all see me. You know, there are some of you standing here right now that will not taste death until you see me come back with my kingdom. These are the words of the leader of Christianity, right? He takes precedence over any man, any document of history. Let every man be a liar and let God be true. Well, here he is in the flesh telling you, I am coming back soon. But why is the predominant thought process today dispensational church age futurism in all the churches in the 501c3s? Why is the main thing that's preached everywhere end time theology, and that we are living in the end times now and tribulation is still to come? When Christ himself said, I am coming back quickly, very soon. If you are being persecuted in one city once I've gone, flee to the next. You will not have gone through all the cities of Israel before I return. That's pretty imminent, you know. It's not a big geographical place. There's not that many cities. You know what I mean? He's telling you, I'm coming back quickly. And if he didn't come back in, let's say, 60 or 70 AD, he was a liar. And those people would have been extremely disappointed. And Jesus can't be a liar. That just doesn't work otherwise. Either he told the truth or he didn't. Either he is the Son of God or he's not. Either he came back quickly or he didn't. Which one is it? You know, you can't pick or choose what you like. And that's what this theory is truly based on. Not some Jesuit in the 1600s who formalized some belief system and called it preterism. It's the words of Christ who said this immediacy. So, timeline, 70 AD, let's say 1,000 years of peace from there, a kingdom gets established, his enemies get put under his foot, and people are forced to follow the regime, or else this is not democracy. Okay, this is theocracy. This is a kingdom. Right, a man is in charge, right, and it's his rule, it's his way or the highway. It's that simple. This is a monarch, all right. This is not like, oh well, maybe we can vote him out if we don't feel like his policies. Nope, you get on board or you don't. It's the kingdom. You know, people can say it's fascism all you want, but describe it however you want. It's full dictatorial control from the Son of God himself. Okay, right. And this is the thing is, he would have had people who didn't want to get on board. I'm not giving up my kingdom. I'm not giving up my people for this man. I'm not bowing down to this person. He's nothing to do with my religion. You know, I don't care who this person is. But then obviously he has his saints who are like the emissaries who go to these kingdoms and say, let's make a deal. Okay, so look, we'll let you keep your kingdom. We'll let you stay in control of this area, but you need to make the pilgrimages to Mount Zion. You need to make it clear. You know, you need to go to the feasts. And this is all in the book of Zechariah, when it explains how it will be, you know. And it says people have to make the pilgrimage every year to the Mount Zion, to Christ's kingdom, to his throne, and take part in the feasts. Okay, and if they don't, they will suffer droughts. And you look at the swaths of desert all over our earth right now in random places. Were these the kingdoms that perhaps refused to get on board during the 1,000 years? People say, well, what about Islam? Where did this come from? It likely rose during the millennial reign from his enemies in the dry places in the deserts who weren't getting on board and were creating their own factions against him. It wasn't perfect, but by any standards of stretch of imagination, it was peace on earth. You know, people were not fighting each other anymore. And those who did get on board with the regime, there was huge benefits, amazing buildings and structures, architecture which was machinery, which had power from the ether, let's say, that could heal, give you longevity, heal sickness, you know, and live longer, learn more, get wiser, build beautiful things, get more skills. You don't need to eat anymore. You don't need to really sleep if you don't want to. Everything's perfect. You have the time. You now have time on your hands, something we do not have time. We don't live very long now, and all our time is taken up by other things because we need to eat. We need to feed ourselves. We need money. We are wrapped up. We don't have time. These people had all the time in the world. What do you do during that time of peace where the devil is locked away for 1,000 years? No more devil, no more demons annoying people and messing everything up and whispering in each other's ear and turning man against each other. No more accusers. and you have this perfect system where the Son of God is quite literally there. All the mysteries of heaven, go and ask. You can know everything. You can know it all. You know, it's kind of go talk to the saints. They're living in 9 dimensions now. Think of the things they can do and tell you. You know what I mean? It's kind of, this was a different place. This was a different time. And those who did get on board, I imagine they had the time to build beautiful artworks, make beautiful buildings, learn the skills necessary to do these things, you know, things that we just don't have time or the resources or know how to do today. And there's your Tartarian Empire. There's your worldwide architectural style appearing on continents where they have no business being the same. You know, this is where it all comes from. This narrative is just immense, but whether that was from 70 AD to 1070, then it ended, and now we've been in the little season since, and all history we have from 1066, let's say, you know, the Battle of Hastings or whatever you want to say, you know, this time period to now, you could say it's been 1,000 years almost, and that's this Satan's season. People would argue, no, that's not a little season then, is it? It's a long time. So people have argued, well, okay, the timeline's off. So 70 AD, okay, what about the collapse of Rome? That was supposedly from like the 6th century. You know, people have argued we have the historical records for the collapse of Rome. We have the early church fathers for those first 500 years. You know, and then obviously Christendom, Catholicism established, Roman Empire collapses, taking over Byzantine Empire. All this sort of stuff starts to come into play, you know. It says, okay, so maybe that 500 years wasn't 500 years. Maybe they've elongated that timeline. Maybe it all happened in a very short period of time and Christ came maybe in the middle of the 1st century or something. Long enough so people could still be alive who witnessed him sacrifice, but not to, who knows? Maybe it all happened in a condensed timeline, or maybe none of it happened at all. Maybe the early church fathers are a fabrication to justify Catholic dominance now, in our time. People have argued different theories and ideas to justify this. I'm not saying there isn't issues here. There are. We know we have documented in 536 the worst year on record. And it was literally a horrible time to be alive. I'm pretty sure the sun went out for like months. It was like a mini ice age. You look at the rings of trees who have been around for that long, and the old show, I think it's dendrochronology, I think it's called, the science. That year always crops up in the rings as a messed up time for that tree. The ring's crooked and all over the place, and it's just a mess. And you can track it back, and it always comes back to this time period about 1,000, maybe 1,500 years ago or so. You know, this time period of just utter destruction and chaos and like an ice age on the earth, you know. And if you look at the descriptions of it, it was plagues like nothing no one's ever seen. People just dropping dead. People having visions of demons and then 3 days later getting a horrible, horrible pox-like illness and dying. This is where the Grim Reaper comes from, you know. And people say, "Oh, no, that's the Black Death. That's the plague in like the 1300s, right? That you're talking about there, Paul." Well, you look at those two parallel events, 536 and and the 1300s. They're identical. They're describing the exact same event. Is it possible they've taken that same event, the tribulation period, where the sun goes dark and sickness, pestilence comes, you know, people just drop dead everywhere and wars all over the place, just destruction, people just tearing each other apart, you know? Have they just taken that one event and turned it into 2 separate events and let's just slap 800 years between them? That doesn't really exist. But then they've done that with loads of events. So it's not just one, and you can say, okay, so now we know the timeline, let's take 800 years off. Well, they've taken another event here and separated it and added, let's say they were 300 years apart. So once they've done that enough, you can't put a chronology together that makes any sense. It becomes a mess. We know we have this concept called the Dark Ages, which is like from 500 to the Enlightenment period of coming out of the 16th century. Okay, so 1,000 years there of the Dark Ages. And they say, this is where nothing really happened. There was no real advancement in humanity because Christian Catholic dogma had dominated for so long, and you know everything was just terrible. Everything was just miserable and darkness, and you know everything. They were all stuck in a time, no progression. You know, everything was just the same for 1,000 years. Mini skirmishes here and there. You know, nothing, no major movements. It's kind of, we'll just call it the Dark Ages because it is nothing. Let's focus on the Enlightenment period. The thing that comes after the Dark Ages, the advancement in science and art and beauty and music and technology all comes in that 1600, 1700 period, you know. Focus on the Enlightenment period. Let's forget about that 1,000-year Dark Age. Well, what if this is dark for light, light for dark situation? What if the true Dark Ages began when the Enlightenment began, when Satan was released for his little season? And what if the true Golden Age was the Dark Age? You know, what if they mixed it up here? And that's what was really going on. You look at these Gothic cathedrals that were supposedly built during the Dark Ages. They are sound manifest physical. They are frequency manifest physical. They are something else. Okay.
But and it seems like when you obscure the sort of chain of custody, the heritage that's passed down by creating these artificial elongations of time, and then these sort of intervals that aren't parallel. So then you have all of these, maybe, as you use this brilliant metaphor, like the way that the yarn ball of the timeline, it becomes all knotted in these places where, yeah, time has been elongated, or maybe it's been obscured so that we don't realize what we're currently in right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to step on anything if you're about to continue, but I do have a question about the Antichrist and separating the truth from the churchianity, because the book of Revelations is now often used as propaganda to say, like, look at what's happening in the world. This is why you need to get right with the church and get right with yourself and your sins, because otherwise, when Christ comes, you're going to be deceived. And so if he's already returned, if he's already had his 1,000-year reign, and we're in the little season, is the Antichrist somehow a part of this? Is that what the Antichrist is referring to? This satanic figure that has been sort of orchestrating the history of the past couple hundred years or so?
Well, if the Antichrist has come, he's already come, and it's happened already. He put himself into the temple of God and declared himself to be God already. It's already happened. And people would say, well, Nero did something similar. He put himself into the temple and declared all these
Right.
things.
Okay, so
It's already
this
kind of
is
been done, and
right.
yeah.
So the Antichrist has been defeated. Christ is reigning, and now this is a new history, so to speak,
Yeah.
or a separate one.
So the Antichrist, the beast, and the false prophet are already in the lake of fire. And then the devil was cast into the abyss for 1,000 years. And that's when Christ reigned
We're
without.
all kind of like on repeat in this retrospective
Well,
history.
I believe it's all convoluted. I think they are
Right,
purposely crafting a narrative to make it look
right,
like we're living during tribulation, to keep us locked into that mindset of where we are
right.
in time, where we are not. It's all
Wow.
just there. So there'll always be a new mark of the beast. There'll always be a new mark of the beast around the corner. Okay, so it's barcodes, and then it's RFID chips, and then it's smartphones, and then it's chips in your card, and then it's a chip in your hand, and then it's the Neuralink or something. I don't know. There's always going to be another mark of the beast around the corner, always, because they need to keep us thinking it's just about to happen. Jesus is just about to return. It's coming, guys. Any minute now. It could be any minute. Ooh, look over there. Could he be the Antichrist? Oh, look at that guy over there. He fits the bill for the Antichrist as well. Is it Putin? Is it Trump? Is it Obama? It's kind of, they'll always give clues to make it seem like you're discovering the truth. And all the gematria lines up with his name, the 666. He is the Antichrist, because they're doing it on purpose, because they know you're going to look for stuff like that. It's an extremely convoluted, long con. Is what this theory is propagating here. They want you to discover these things. It's like, whoops, I accidentally dropped this top secret file. I hope nobody leaks it to the internet. It's that kind of thing. It's a game. It's a script. They've made it all up for us to keep us locked into the wrong time. So we don't realize it's all already happened. You're not waiting for tribulation to come upon you, but I bet they're going to do a bloody good try at making it look like tribulation's happening. Project Bluebeam, frequency weapons, and the rest of it. They're gonna they're gonna pull out all the stops. They're gonna make it seem like, it's happening. It's going down, now at any moment, because they want to keep you locked there. So you're deceived. And then obviously when aliens rock up, that'll just throw everything out the boat for Christians. They'll be like, I don't know how to explain this. I don't have any context for this event. This isn't this isn't there. This is not in the book. This is not what I said would happen, what I was told would happen. Maybe it's all been a lie. People lose their faith very quickly, because they can't fit aliens into the narrative. What do you mean aliens? I thought we were only the thing God created. This doesn't make any sense. It's kind of, but if you understand this theory, I'm telling you now, all of it's explained. And it's still biblically square. It's what Jesus told you would happen. It's what Revelation said would happen. It's there in black and white. It's as clear as day. This whole,
Well, and
the reestablishing of God's people in the Holy Land. It's all convoluted nonsense. They are not the real people. And none of it's true. Yeah, that kind of explains what you were hinting at there. So I think it's all just made up convoluted nonsense now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that certainly plays into a lot of the cheaper, sort of flimsier conspiracy theories that you see very often. Anytime, there's news from events going on in the Middle East, war or not related, there's always this sort of biblical prophetic tinge to it because they're playing with this, they're manipulating it, and
I want you to get together